Dinosaurs are cool. That's pretty universally accepted. The idea that we could bring them back to life is also pretty universally accepted, but not really for the reasons you might think. This is our channel, and today we're answering the extraordinary question, could we clone a dinosaur? Extraordinary questions deserve extraordinary answers, and that's why we're bringing in someone very special to help us answer this one. Dr. Emily Bernard is a paleontologist who specializes in dinosaurs. She's an expert at what we can learn from the fossils that have survived for millions of years. So let's ask her, could we clone a dinosaur? As it turns out, there's a lot to consider here, which makes sense because the idea of cloning dinosaurs is so popular in movies. But it's all too easy to forget that real-life science is different than Hollywood science. And to understand why, let's start with what cloning even means. You see, if we want to clone something, we need to start with DNA. The word DNA might sound like a chemical or some kind of weird wizardry, but it's actually just a fancy way of saying instructions. Everything that happens in your body happens because of the DNA inside you. It's what makes you you. Your DNA is contained inside your cells, and it's there in these long, thin strands. Scientists have learned how to take that DNA and use it to make copies of entire organisms. We've cloned other animals before, and the process starts with taking a single cell from a living animal, then removing the DNA from that cell, and putting it into another cell that has had its own DNA removed. Then, under the right conditions, that cell will start to divide, and eventually you end up with two separate cells that are genetically identical clones of the original. So that's what we would need to do with a dinosaur. We'd need to find some dinosaur DNA and put it into something else. In theory, we could use a bird as the host organism since birds are the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. But there's a problem. Just because birds are related to dinosaurs doesn't mean that they're compatible. Think about how dogs and humans are related. We share a common ancestor way back in the past, and over time, both species have changed and evolved. So even though we're related, a human egg won't just implant and grow inside a dog embryo won't grow inside a human. And the same goes for dinosaurs and birds. Their bodies are just too different. But there may be a way around this issue. See, it's not the egg that needs to be implanted, it's the embryo. So maybe instead of using a bird egg, we could just use a bird embryo. But wait, don't unalive eggs and embryos come from alive chickens? Yes, they do. But when it comes to cloning, we're not trying to create a new chicken. We're trying to create a new dinosaur. And that means that we need some actual dinosaur DNA. And that's where things get tricky because DNA breaks down after a relatively short amount of time. When an animal dies, its body starts to break apart. Its muscles and organs decay and are eventually consumed by scavengers or decomposed by bacteria. After that, only the hard parts remain, things like bones, teeth, and shells. But even those aren't immune to the passage of time. Over millions of years, water seeps in and replaces the insides of the bones with minerals like calcite and silica. Eventually, you're left with an empty husk, a fossil. So the DNA inside a dinosaur's body almost certainly didn't survive the fossilization process. But there is a small chance that it might have survived outside of the body. You see, DNA isn't just found inside an animal's cells. Some animals, like turtles and tortoises, store a significant portion of their DNA in non-cellular structures called organelles that are located outside of the cell's nucleus. These organelles are thought to contain DNA in order to protect it. They're a sort of backup system in case the DNA inside the nucleus gets damaged. And the advantage of these organelles is that they don't get destroyed during the fossilization process. But even so, the odds of finding any usable dinosaur DNA in a fossil are slim. It's unlikely that any dinosaur fossils contain any DNA at all. But just in case, let's pretend we found some. Now what? Well, now we need to figure out how to extract it. You see, even if we manage to isolate some DNA from a dinosaur fossil, it won't look anything like the DNA we're used to working with today. That's because DNA is made of 4 different chemical building blocks: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. But over time, those building blocks can change. Sometimes the fossilized remains of an organism can tell us what environment that organism lived in. For instance, scientists can estimate how salty the oceans were millions of years ago based on the ratios of certain elements preserved in ancient clams. But sometimes it can tell us a little bit more. Scientists have actually found fossilized dinosaur eggs in China that contain soft tissue and even blood vessels filled with heme, the part of blood that carries oxygen to the rest of the body. If we can preserve something as delicate as heme, then perhaps we can preserve DNA too. In 2007, scientists published a paper describing what they'd found inside a fossil of a young Tyrannosaurus named Scotty. The fossil was discovered in 2003 and was estimated to be 68 million years old. Using powerful microscopes, scientists managed to peer inside the preserved bone and were surprised to find that they could actually see structures called osteocytes, cells that remain active even inside a dinosaur fossil. And in 2014, scientists reported finding collagen, the main component of connective tissue like cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. And collagen can preserve for a very long time. It's been found in dinosaur fossils ranging between 66 and 75 million years old. And in 2021, researchers published a paper describing the first ever amino acid sequence recovered from a dinosaur. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins like collagen. They linked the amino acid sequence to a protein called beta-chain collagen 1, which had already been identified in modern birds. All of these discoveries suggest that there might be a small possibility that dino DNA could also be preserved in fossils. But so far, no one has been able to extract any. Let's just assume for a second that we did find some intact dino DNA. Now we could go ahead and clone our very own dinosaur park. Wait, hold on, class dismissed. It's time for reality check. There's a big difference between finding some well-preserved DNA and being able to use that DNA to clone a dinosaur. You see, DNA has to be a complete set of instructions. Each strand contains thousands upon thousands of genes that code for particular traits. Those genes need to be arranged in a very specific order, and they need to be complete. Even one missing piece of DNA could mean the difference between a healthy dinosaur and a sickly one. And we're still missing a lot of pieces of the dinosaur puzzle. We know what a T-Rex looked like, and we have a good idea of what it ate and where it lived, but we don't know what its behavior was like or how it moved. We don't know if it was a fast runner or a slow walker. We don't know how it communicated with other dinosaurs. And it's possible that all of these behaviors are encoded in its DNA. So even if we could clone a T-Rex, it wouldn't really be a T-Rex. It would be some approximation of one. It would be like a T-Rex-shaped animal with some of the characteristics of a T-Rex, but without the behavior, physiology, and adaptations that make it a T-Rex. It would essentially be a failed clone. And speaking of failed clones, have you ever seen a mule? Mules are the hybrid offspring of a horse and a donkey. They're strong and sure-footed, which makes them great pack animals. But they can't reproduce. That's because horses have 64 chromosomes in their cells, but donkeys only have 62. So when they mate, the resulting offspring have 63 chromosomes. Since mules can't reproduce, they can't pass on their 63 chromosomes. So every mule is basically a failed clone. The same thing would happen if we tried to clone a dinosaur. Even if we could somehow cobble together a full set of dino DNA, it would likely be missing pieces. So even if it worked, we'd end up with something that wasn't truly a dinosaur. All of this is to say that while cloning dinosaurs might be a lot of fun to imagine, it's a lot less fun in reality. And given how much work it is just to clone a sheep, it might be a very long time before we see a Jurassic Park. Speaking of which, if you enjoy science and tech stories like this one, be sure to subscribe. And thanks for watching.